Hey folks, got sort of an unexpected one here. It's been quite some time since Atlas has put out some new locomotives, and this is a re-release of one that they've done many times before. It's the Dash 8. I've had a couple Dash 8s over the years. I had some of the Bachmann Spectrum ones, which are very good actually for the price. And I did have an Atlas, I guess it was the Master Series, which is the one with sound that was one of the QSI early versions. I ripped all that out and put ESU in there. But, you know, moving to modern times here, they're putting ESU in their newest models. So I picked some of these up at Midwest Model Railroad. And the price was really good. These came in right around $202, which for any HO scale diesel with sound on board, excellent price. So we'll take a look at it here. And my Bachmann engines used to be 2 Conrails, so I really wanted to have at least 2 Conrail engines again. So that is what I got. They're both in the Conrail quality scheme. Some other versions of the Atlases that have been done just say Conrail on them. They've also done some patched versions for both CSX and NS. So what do we got here? Not sure what these are, but there's your sunshades. So that's nice and tedious to put on. Also, kind of an unusual packaging for these. It's extremely small. So, I mean, you got a full-size 6-axle locomotive that comes in a box that's even smaller than auto racks. So, you gotta wonder why these companies need these big, humongous boxes just for a locomotive that's not that big. So, much like earlier versions of this, it comes in this packaging in which the engine is bolted to the bottom. Not the biggest fan of that. The recent releases of MTH, I believe, have come this way. Also, some of the Intermountain Tier 4s had this style of packaging, which makes sense. I believe they're all made in the same factory. And I believe this is one of the first versions of Atlas that's been made in the new factory since the factory closing. So I'm glad to see that they're up and running again. So I'm going to pause here and we're going to undo these 2 screws. Not sure where that was. And then we'll take a look at it. So got it out of the packaging here, and we're going to take a look around at it. It's just starting up front. You notice these are not silver tipped, as they probably should be. There are marker lights there. I'm kind of interested on whether those are actually functional or not. The wiper blade detail here seems a bit oversized. And also it comes with the Atlas plastic couplers on there, so I have to switch those out for some metal ones. You got a cab figure in there. And this is one of the first models on the market to have an actual chain back here in the back. So that's been present on all of their Dash 8 since they've done them for many years. Not sure exactly what year the Atlas Dash 8 debuted, but I know some of the early versions do have QSI, I believe, Revolution in them, which is probably at least 2010. They may be slightly older than that. Not super heavy. The other thing you got to keep in mind is these are a little bit shorter than a Gevo. So we'll take a look at a Walthers one here. kind of side by side. So almost, I think there might be something like a 6-foot difference on these or something like that. Not sure what the actual scale dimensions are, but that's a pretty good look at it on all angles. So let's see what it can do on the track. So we got it on track here, and it does appear on this one that they have it set to when you put it on the track, it actually powers up automatically. You don't have to push F8 to get it to start. So that's kind of a little bit unlike some of the ESU locomotives that are out there. Usually as a default, you have to hit F8 to get it to actually start to make noise or go or anything else. So I turned off F8 just to get started here so we could kind of listen to the setup. So we're going to hit F8 and see what happens here. So F8's tied to the number boards. Pretty quiet. Let's see what else we got here. F6, maybe that's the ditch lights. Ooh. Only got one. That's not good. Well, I'm a little bit concerned about the ditch lights there because only one is coming on. I don't know how well you can see it, but just the conductor side came on. I'm not sure if something's mapped incorrectly as far as functions or if there's a bigger problem there. We'll go ahead and hit the bell here. And we'll do the whistle. Again, very quiet. Now I'm going to go through some of the other functions here to see if maybe we can get that other ditch light to turn on. And I'm just turning on the functions above F12 here. I'm going to put it on pause while I do that. So just to see here if I was doing something wrong, I did take the other one I got out of the box, and it would appear that the ditch lights work on this one. However, one is significantly brighter than the other. I don't know how well this will show up here, but you can see the one there on this side is significantly brighter. So I'm not sure what's up with that. It's enough that it's noticeable for sure. Also, despite going through what is the manual here for functions, this says that class lights should be F13. The ditch lights are on F6. I went through all the different functions and it does not appear that these markers are functional at all. So we'll see how it runs. There must be a lot of momentum programmed into these because they take a while to actually get going. We'll mute the motor or the sounds there. Maybe mute doesn't work. Well, doesn't seem to be a way of muting it. Pretty smooth. Let's see if the ditch lights flash correctly. They appear to. Also play around a little bit with the F9 drive hold feature, and it didn't seem to do anything at all, so I'm wondering if these maybe have a really old version of the sound file on here. Also nothing in the documentation that says which ESU decoder this is, whether it's ESU Selects, whether it's Loc Sound 4 or Loc Sound 5. Really don't know. There's nothing documented. It just says ESU sound and that's it. So I think we're gonna have to tear one of these apart anyway, just to see what's going on with the ditch lights, see if I can even out the color, and we're probably gonna have to throw it on the programmer here, the lock programmer, to see what version of the decoder is in here. So next we're gonna probably tear one apart here. So we're here with the shell taken off, and the shell actually is very easy to take off. Pretty much you just remove the two coupler pockets and the shell just lifts off from the top. I don't see a way of undoing the chain, so the lid's kind of tethered to the bottom here. So some interesting changes that I see in here. On older models, they used to put a 32mm speaker in there, and then the non-sound models would ship with these weight plates. But it seems like they've moved the speaker back to here. Taking a look at the sound module there. No real indication of what version that is. Let's see if maybe something's noted on the underside of it. A little hard to do one-handed. I'm going to put it on pause here. So remove the sound here, and here at the top I'm hoping that says LS5, which may hint at this being a 5.0 decoder, and you can kind of see the light board there. And also something else I didn't mention earlier, the color of these LEDs is very, very yellow. It's a little bit off. The ditch light connectors here are these two pieces. I'm gonna play around a little bit with those. Everything seems like it's wired up okay. It was on this side that it wasn't working, so I'm gonna mess around with those metal connectors here and give it another test fit and see if I can get that other ditch light working. If it's not, sadly, I'm not sure that you can even really replace those with how that's done. So hopefully I can get this working. As we dig a little bit further here, I've completely extracted the ditch light LED. And you can see the little surface mount there. And I'm going to go ahead and test it, which I'm going to do off camera real quick here. So very interesting here, but the LED works. So at this point I'm thinking maybe the polarity's wrong, or something between here and here isn't hooked up. So I'm going to put this back on the track, and I'm going to try just kind of touching up against here and seeing if, well, actually I'm going to try both sides and seeing if maybe just one side's solder pads are bad here. So I'm going to mess around with some troubleshooting and we'll see what we find. So the LED tested good, so I've kind of put everything back the way it was. I have a little bit of glue in here making sure that this sets exactly in that position. So probably have to wait till morning for this to dry, and I guess we'll pick it back up. So fast forward about a day here, and after much trial and tribulation, I have come up with a solution. And that was simply that I put a little bead of solder on each of the pads here, because for whatever reason it was just not making contact and I could not get that other ditch light to light up. But it is working now, and I didn't really have to mess with anything there, so I didn't want to have to actually solder some wires onto that, because then it kind of takes away from the niceness of being able to completely remove the shell. So we'll move on to some interior modifications next. While I have it apart, we might as well. So what I'm going to do here to modify for the speakers is, this is the factory speaker that's back here, which is just kind of crappy. There's a little harness that's hooked up to it that plugs in here. I'm going to remove that and desolder this off of there. And you can see here from previous models, they've kept this here. Typically what happens is non-sound models have these plates in on either side, and the sound models typically come equipped with speakers here. So I'm going to basically treat this like as it's a non-sound locomotive, and I'm going to remove both of these, and I'm going to put in some TCS 32mm speakers. Going to wire them in parallel, so we'll get a 4 ohm load off of the decoder here. So we'll do that next. All you do to get rid of these little plates here that are on either side is you just kind of undo the screw here and move over the bracket, and then they just pop right out. So I'm going to go ahead and prep my speakers here. Speaker swap is done, and you'll see here I went and tucked in my wiring, added a little bit of Kapton tape, made a little spot here so these won't get pulled out. So now we're going to put the shell on and see how it sounds. So I went ahead and put it all back together here. Finally got all the lights working, which was just an absolute pain. Put on the sunshades. One of the little pegs actually busted, so I had to use a small bit of glue getting that back on there, but I think it looks pretty good. And also I silver tipped my MU hoses. And a little brake hose there. You know, something that Atlas could have spent 5 seconds doing, but it's okay. I'll do it. Another thing to note here on these is the couplers. You'll notice this is a very, very short front coupler. And then on the back, I actually put a longer one on. Just because if you put a short one on either end, you go around a corner, you're going to be hitting into the ditch lights, you're going to be hitting into the grab irons there. It needs a little more clearance in the corners, so this is kind of the same thing that I do on my SD70 ACEs from Athearn, as I always put a little bit longer one on the back. That way I can run these nose to tail, or I can run them back to back. Just gives you the clearance that you need. One last little detail here that I did was also painting the inside of the exhaust black. From the factory, these just come bright silver, and it looks really stupid when you're looking overhead of it. I'll show you here. This is an unmodified one, and you can see that looks kind of dumb. So now that the internal work is done on it and pretty much all the mechanical things work, I was not happy with the way the sound file worked and some of the lighting effects. So I'm going to show you what I did here in Lock Programmer. So I went and downloaded, I believe the sound set's called S0747. It's a -8 file. This is one of the new high-res files, so I guess that has a better audio fidelity in it. So of course we set the address here, and we're going to go down through some of the things that I changed. I don't use momentum in my engine, so I turn that off. The factory setting here for the ESU power pack's kind of dead in the middle. There is room, since that speaker was removed in the back half of the engine. There's more than enough room that you could put an ESU power pack in this engine if you wanted to. I haven't really noticed a need to. Function mapping. So one thing that I'm going to change here is the number boards from being tethered with F8 to just being separately controlled by F5. And the reason I'm doing that is because when you mute the engine and it's still running around, it actually kills your marker, not marker lights, but it kills the number boards. So I want those to be able to stay on. And I didn't really mess around too much in here. The functions in this file that I downloaded do seem to match up pretty well with the sheet that came with it, and I tried to keep it as close to this as possible, just so it gives it more of that factory feel. So that's it for the functions. Now on the lighting effects here, some things that I did change. I was noticing that one ditch light was actually a little bit brighter than the other one. So one way you can kind of cheat that in here is you can turn down the brightness on one of them. And then it kind of gives the illusion that they're basically the same when they're both on. The other thing was the number boards were as bright as the headlight and the ditch lights. So I turned the brightness down quite a bit on those. And I'm going to show you that effect now. I don't know how well it shows on camera. So you'll notice here that this almost seems like it's a different color than this. I can assure you in person these are much, much duller than that, which is kind of what I was going for. And while we're in here, I also set the horn to an RS3L. Much better than the one that came with it. So we'll go back here and take a look at some of the things I did for that. Also, I didn't particularly care for the flashing rate from the factory, so you can adjust that in here. I used values of 27 and 54 for my flash rate. Motor settings I didn't mess with too much, but that's going to need some work also. Just because this engine at speed step 1 or 2 actually doesn't run very good. So I suspect that there may be some settings that need to be changed there. And my sound settings. not in this one, over in here. Sound slot 3 here is where, from the factory, this contains just something that says ESU horn packs or something like that. But you can actually go through the template pack, version 1.9, and they have an RS3L here, and I just slid that over to fill that slot there, and that's pretty much all I needed to do there. So next we're going to actually get into the running characteristics of it, and I did run this on some not breakup, but break-in time. It's got probably about 4 hours of run time on it now. So we're going to see what it can do. So we're back on track here, and I want to show you some of the improvements that we've made as far as the sound. So we'll go ahead and crank it up here. I'll hit F8. Really love that horn. I put an E-bell on there. And we're at like 1 speed step here, but it's not actually moving. So the motor's going to need some CV work there. So we're going to go ahead and crank it up here and see what kind of top speed it can bring. And I've already gone ahead and adjusted the CVs for max speed. So we'll see what it can do. On a freight engine, 70 miles an hour is all the better that I need. Pretty sure it's going to do that. Yeah, so we can dial that back quite a bit. So pretty good there. So next we're going to take a look at pulling power. And I'm sure I previously mentioned it, but in this one, there's a little bit less weight than what some of the previous versions are, just because they used to have this whole back section here was just solid metal, whereas now that's kind of recessed away because they put the speaker back here. With the speakers being up front now, I don't really have the extra weight plate up here, and I also don't have it there. So this is probably the lightest version of this engine that they've done, Keep in mind though, with all that empty space back there, you could stuff a bunch of weight in there if you really wanted to. So we're going to compare it against an Intermountain Gevo here, which is kind of on the lower side as far as pulling power goes, and we'll see how it does. Not really sure how this one to go here. The Gevo is a little bit wider, as far, well, not wider, but it's actually longer. Probably around similar weight, so we'll see how it does. Well, looks like the Intermountain's walking away with it. Yeah, even with the Conrail going faster, there's just nothing it can do. So this engine, and to be kind of prototypical as well, Dash 8s typically would pull less than what a Dash 9 or what a Gevo would. So that's not terribly unrealistic, but like I said, keep in mind you can improve that if you really wanted to. And I have 2 of these. I'm pretty sure that 2 or 3 of them, you're still going to be able to pull a pretty healthy amount. All right, let's wrap it up, because this is going considerably longer than what I thought it was going to go, but there's a lot of things that I ran into and little tidbits that I think people might appreciate and learn something through if they get this. So at this point in time, I do definitely believe this is the best Dash 8 model that you can buy on the market currently. My only disappointment with it is that it doesn't have the functional marker lights, and that's probably the one thing that, you know, say at some point if Scale Trains does do this, if they make one with functional markers, that would probably prompt me to get rid of these. But these are something that I got to replace my Bachmann Spectrum engines, which if you looked at some of my earliest videos, there's a couple videos of them in there. But they were actually my first 2 HO freight diesels that I ever bought when I was a teenager. So these are kind of like my own personal heritage unit, so it's nice to have some Conrail GE engines back in the lineup. For the price of these at about $202, I don't really think you're going to find a better engine. Just keep in mind, as we've saw here, there may be some issues that you may run into out of the box. However, you know, and I wouldn't consider myself an expert. I'm kind of a solid intermediate kind of guy as far as what I can do. Definitely within my abilities to correct anything that I thought was wrong with these engines, and it didn't really cost me anything. I used a couple dabs of paint here and there, a little bit of time. I already had an ESU lock programmer, so that made that part pretty easy to work with. I have all the tools to take apart engines, so pretty easy for me to get this exactly how I wanted it. So pretty good engine from Atlas. You know, if you're looking for one of these and you can't find one from the newest run, don't be afraid to pick up one of these from one of the older runs, because it's basically the same thing, and in a couple areas they actually are a little bit more superior. It's just as, you know, they're weighted a little bit better, probably more inexpensive, and it's not really hard to rip out the you know, if they come with QSI in there, it's not really that hard to take that out and hardwire it for something else. And they do have the Silver Series, which is your DCC ready. Any of those that you can find, I think, are a definite bargain, because they're usually in the $100 to about $130 range, and it's a pretty solid locomotive for that range. So pretty happy with these, and that's about it for this one.